Can you please tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, and where you live and work?
Okay. I'm Carol Kauffman, and I live in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and I work here at Harvard Medical School at McLean Hospital at the Institute of Coaching.
Right, and what do you do?
Well, here, what I do is sometimes I supervise interns and I teach seminars. Right now I'm doing coach training with physicians at MGH to kind of teach them about positive psychology and coaching so that they can start doing it with the residents. And ideally the plan is if they are doing it, they'll then actually become more interested in learning more about it and possibly using it with patients.
Right, right. And do you do other things?
Oh, so how I think of my career, like what I do. Okay, so I think of it as sort of 4 silos. So on one hand, I do authentic leadership development, where right now what I do is work with a Fortune 50 company and do intense leadership development programs, pretty much informed by positive psychology. And so that's one thing I do. So I do that about 20–25% of my time. Then the other silo is organizational clients. So an organization will hire me to work with some of their top leaders, and so I will do coaching engagements with them. Then the third group is I supervise around 25 executive coaches, and so I supervise their coaching practices. And then around 25% of the time, I'm the director of the Institute of Coaching.
Right, right.
And working with the website, and that includes also writing academic papers and keeping the website up to date, and the Harvard Coaching Conference and the Institute of Coaching Research Forum, and I think I'm getting overwhelmed thinking about it now.
Right, right. And so what's your background for doing that? Educational background and training?
Okay. It all started actually with an abnormal psychology textbook, where one little paragraph tucked away in this textbook was about super kids, resilient children of psychotic mothers. And so I sort of got very, very interested in positive psychology before positive psychology existed in that way. So then I got my first job as a research assistant in 1974. And when I showed up, I had like no idea what things were actually like. So I showed up, you know, I looked around 12 years old, I was 21, and said, gee, you're doing this whole big research project on high-risk children of psychotic mothers. I read these papers when I was in college, and can I add a resilience project to the study? And they said, sure. So, and then they said, and whatever you find, you can write up. So that's what I did, and it really informed all the rest of my training. What I found was that there were in fact resilient children of psychotic mothers, and I had information on these children for the 6 years before the study, and went back and looked at what made them resilient. And primarily it was the quality of relationships they had with their mothers, even if the mother was psychotic, and if the mother was able to allow them to have another close person.
Right.
So that's how I started. So then when I went into graduate school, I had that headset of looking for resilience, and I found then my psychoanalytic training meaningful but painful, because I always felt like there was something wrong with it and I didn't know what. So then when I was done with my psychoanalytic training, I did cognitive behavioral postdoc, which felt closer to a truth. Then after that, here at McLean, there's a movement started called Relational Cultural Theory, which looked more at women, but really eventually everyone, looking at things that we thought of as pathology really being strengths, and to question the assumptions of traditional psychotherapy. And then in January 2000, when the positive psychology American psychologist came out, that was it for me.
Right.
It was sort of like, this is what I've been looking for the whole time I've been studying, and now I have it. And I was really very renewed. From there I went into coaching and then started the Institute and my coaching practice.
Right, right.
So before that, I had about 38,000 hours of psychotherapy practice. So I did a lot of therapy through the years with trauma survivors, eating disorders, you name it.
Right, right. And what was your coaching training?
My coaching training. Well, when people ask me how did I become a coach, I say it's because I won it. And that's because I went to a workshop and the guy gave away 1 free tuition. And so I won it. And I started, and that was at Mentor Coach with Ben Dean. And I started out with their 6-month program. Then the next thing I did was the authentic happiness coaching that Marty and that whole group did for a couple of years. And then I completed my coach training at the Institute of Life Coach Training. And I got my PCC with ICF in, I think, 2005 or so.
Right,
maybe 2006.
Right, right. And can you tell me a little bit, so coaching, how much was that a part of your job? Was that 25%?
In general now, I would say it's 95% of what I do is positive psychology and coaching.
Right, right.
And I still have a teeny weeny clinical practice.
Right, right.
And what I did before 2003, I actually was doing what I thought was coaching. And it wasn't until I took the coaching course and took the positive psychology course that I realized that I was really just doing some kind of training. It wasn't really coaching.
Right, right.
Because it was still based on my integrating things and thinking of them as people overcoming challenges, really, rather than just building on their strengths.
Right, right, right. And the people that you typically coach now, who are they?
Now, the people that I coach now are primarily business leaders. And I'm not quite sure how that happened, but that just sort of wound up happening with who started calling me. So what I just finished working with the top 100 leaders of this Fortune 50 company, now working with the next 500, and training the top 100 how to coach the next 500. Then in my organizational clients, most of them, typically I work with the person, I usually work with people who are either report to the CEO or the C-level or one layer down.
Right.
I don't typically work with CEOs themselves, but I work with sort of the next ring around them of emerging leaders.
Right.
And then my executive coaches that I work with.
Yeah. And what do they want you to help them with? Like what challenges or goals is it that they want you?
So for the leadership development work, what they want there is they're doing a big changeover in the corporation of really moving people to a performance culture. And so that is really helping every single leader step up their game. Doing that through finding what their purpose is and then matching what they do with their purpose. Right. And I can talk more about that when we talk about interventions. Pretty much everyone is a very high performance leader, but in order to become truly great, there's something that they have to expand in their repertoire. And so I'll be called in to do that.
Right.
So it's not really remedial, but it's, the person maybe is in charge of X number of people and they want to make them able to be in charge of more people.
Yeah.
And so what are the skills and the ways of being that they have to include in how they are in order to become a serious leader? Right,
right, right. And what would that look like? Like what would a coaching engagement look like? If I was a leader and I wanted coaching.
Okay, so I'm working with one company right now, which is a health-related company. And so there's the CEO, and then there's my guy, and then underneath him is like the CMO of the organization, a bunch of other things. And he is a really good analytic leader. And what he has to do is learn how to inspire others to raise everybody's level of their game. And in order to do that, I'm basing what I do on Losada's work with him. So really helping him to increase his positivity, his ability to ask rather than tell, and his sense of purpose. And I can tell you more about him, but it's like he's got to raise his game and inspire more people.
Yeah.
So he comes to me, and that's what we talk about. What are his strengths? And then what we do is we do a social network analysis of every single person he works with. What is the relationship like? How do we tweak that relationship? And for example, with him, as he keeps talking about people, I'm quite struck by how negative he is.
Right.
So at some point in time, I'll just take out my baseball bat and hit him on the side of the head about that.
Right, right.
Because he really is negative, and our relationship is building, so I'm not at a place now where I can do that, but I expect to do it in the next couple of weeks.
Right, right.
So that's sort of typical. With the leadership development stuff, it would be something like someone is head of communications, and they're terrific on multiple dimensions, but there's something about their leadership style that's keeping them from being world class.
Yeah.
So we'll identify what that is. And what these people do is they have very serious 360s before I come in, and I'll work with that. So you can see if you want to ask me more about that in the what we do section.
Yeah. And so what would normally happen before the first session? Like, how would people contact you?
The truth is I have no idea. What'll happen is, so I got a phone call from this one healthcare related company, and they just said that they were looking for a coach, and they Googled and they saw my name, and so they called me up. Another person contacted me because they said they thought I was the most credentialed coach in the United States.
Right.
Yeah, like, right. But so I get, it's sort of wacky, and then typically I'll talk to them, and I think one of the reasons I wind up getting the gigs is what I do is I take this as a teaching moment for them, and so I will just teach them about coaching.
So then you do that on the phone, or?
Yeah, talk to them on the phone and say, you know, this is the coaching, this is the kind of coaching I do, here's other kinds of coaching, here's about what people charge, here's what you can expect. I'll send them to the website to learn more about coaching so that they can just figure out for themselves what's a good match for them.
Right, right, right.
So typically I'll get a call, I'll talk to the head of HR or the head of leadership development, then they'll call me back, then we'll talk about the person for a while, then I'll set up an appointment with the person, we'll have a short chat, see if it feels like a good match. If it is, then I come in and talk to the person for a while, then I go back to the head of HR, talk to the CEO, talk to some stakeholders, see how do other people see this leader, then work with the leader for a while. Then after a month or two, then I'll do a really big 360, which is I'll interview 15 people that work with a person so they can really get feedback on their leadership style and how they come across, what's their intended impact, how good are they with their intended impact, and what's their unintended impact.
Right, right, right.
And basically, it actually turns out to be a lot of fun, and you feel like a detective.
Right.
You know, because a lot of these people, they're really great, and it's, you just have to unpack, like, what is it that they're doing that sometimes just doesn't work, and you feel like a detective trying to sort it out.
Right, right. And so what would normally happen in the first session?
Well, people function very differently in their first sessions. In my work, I typically do not do a long and extended intake. That's just not my style. I will begin by literally sitting down with a person, and I'll say, okay, how can I be of the most use to you right now? What would help you the most to talk about? And they'll just start talking.
Right.
And then as it emerges, then, now remember, I will have talked to the HR by then, I might have talked to the CEO, so I'll just start asking questions and just try to start building a picture of the leader, building a picture of their strengths, and developing, getting a sense of what is their leadership vision. And then I have my own idea of what I think a more optimal leadership vision is, that's based more on positive psychology, and then see what we can do about seeing does the leader, does that vision ignite for them?
Right.
And most of the time it ignites. So you just sort of keep going along until they ignite.
Yeah.
And then you go with that.
Right, right. And what then happens?
Different for different people. So I think of a woman, this is in a multinational financial firm, and basically the woman is brilliant. Everyone says she's like the most brilliant person in the company, best with clients, best problem solver, and people would rather vomit than work with her.
Right.
And so I met her, and I actually really liked her, which is more how she comes across to the business clients. So we had to unpack what was it she was doing that alienated everyone. And so we just got into it, like really the nitty-gritty. So in the beginning we looked at some of the 360, where basically people thought she was domineering or chaotic or wasn't in tune with them, or that she would just go on and on and on. So here's an example, a little tiny example of what I might do. So with this woman, I mean, she had, with her people, she just did not have the emotional intelligence that she could have with clients. So one thing we did is, like, basically, can you do here what you do there?
Yeah.
And her clients in this case would be gigantic banks or hedge funds or people who have a lot of money who need to do something with it. Those are the institutional clients, not individual people. She was brilliant with them. So we worked on, you have this strength here, how can you think to bring it into your work?
Yeah.
So first we did a lot of that. Then we did things like when people kept saying that she would kind of prattle on and not notice that she'd completely lost her audience. So then what we did is so here would be an example of what I do with positive psychology and how I change an intervention. So I love the thing with Ben Zander, where he talks about that if people are really sort of in a flow state and sort of in their bliss, he talks about they have bright eyes.
Yeah.
Right? And so what I had her do was a bright eye campaign. So, because if I asked her, can you tell if people are engaged, she would report, oh, it was great. And then you talk to the people she was with and they said, we wanted to kill ourselves.
Right.
And she couldn't see it.
Right.
So we had to train her to see it. So literally I had her do a bright eye campaign.
Right.
Said, during the week, I just want you to notice the brightness in people's eyes and really notice when the brightness in their eyes goes out.
Right.
So time I saw her next, he goes, well, I was having a discussion with the CEO of the company, and the eye brightness factor was quite excellent. Then I mentioned something about diversity, and I believe I went on too long because the brightness factor in his eyes decreased approximately 60%. So I changed the topic of conversation to one that I knew was of inherent interest to him, and I believe I retained approximately 40% of the original eye brightness. Okay, so this is like, oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my. But the thing is, she couldn't just get it. Mm. She just couldn't get it. Mm. And the thing is, because she was so beautiful and wealthy and talented, nobody'd ever noticed that she did not have this kind of basic emotional attunement skill. Mm. I mean, it wasn't like she had Asperger's, but she really was not connected. Mm. So we would take the eye brightness, yeah, and then she just started noticing eye brightness. So we went on an eye brightness campaign. Then we went on a warmth campaign, that her job was to emanate warmth wherever she went. And that she also had to go on a reverse the focus campaign, where whenever she was feeling snotty about someone, she had to make herself think, what are 3 things I appreciate about this person? Yeah. And then she could find her warmth and interact. And her line manager and the CEO think that she's doing significantly better.
Right.
So it's sort of, so you can see it kind of like informed by positive psychology, and then, you know, it's got to get sometimes like really granular in order to help the person move forward. And
do you have any specific process or model you follow, or is it different from time to time? It's
completely iterative from person to person. It's whatever it is that what ignites the spark. You know, so for this particular woman, for example, the first time I talked with her, now this refers a little bit to your knowledge sharing question. Okay, so we talked to her about a whole bunch of things, and she was like mildly interested, but I noticed she wasn't taking notes. A lot of times when I'll work with someone, they'll take notes, so or show that they're really engaged. So I kept working with her, and then it became clear to me, oh right, I remember what it was. She said, well, one of my problems is that my people are all so boring. You know, my teams are really boring, and you know, I have to lead them, and I'm not interested. So you can have a field day with that. So I said to him, I said to her, rather, what would it be like if you understood that your job was to make other people interesting? That you had the capacity to make others interesting through your attitude. And she thought that was intriguing, and so I told her about Ellen Langer's research with the dolphins, where generally what it was that the people who worked with the dolphins, either one group was said, think of your dolphin as like every other dolphin. The other group was told, think how your dolphin is different from any other dolphin. And that if you were in that group, the dolphins swam to you more quickly. And, you know, I mean, I don't know how statistically significant it was, but basically, literally, just your thinking had an impact on the relationship. So I told her that, and the pen came out, she started scribbling. That really engaged her. Right. And so that's where we started with the, okay, so your job is make people interesting. Yeah. That's your job to do that. And so then we proceeded to get to how she could reverse the focus on them, how could she notice the eye brightness, how could she work on the warmth campaign, what were the different things that she could do to get out of her stance of they're boring. Right. Because obviously her stance of people are boring was what was translating into people not wanting to work with her. I mean, who wants to work with someone who's looking at you like... Yeah. And trying to fake it. Right, yeah. So she would try to fake it and be thoroughly bored and wouldn't understand how that just emanated. Right. And she's done a lot of work. Right. And you had a specific question that you would start with. Do you also have a specific way of ending a coaching engagement? Each session, you mean? Or each session or the whole engagement? Usually with each session, because there's so much of this emergent process, you know, we sort of follow the energy of the person, and so, you know, they make one set of discoveries and we move around in another set of discoveries. What I try to do is to balance the little bit of the chaos that can happen. So the last period of time I'll say, okay, so what was useful about today? Let's go through today. What felt useful? What didn't feel useful? And can you think of what you might want to do over the coming couple of weeks with that information? So I'll usually try and get them to think about what was intriguing to them and what's on their growth curve and what do they want to do. Right. So usually, and I don't, with these people, I mean, they're too high level to say, here's your homework. Yeah. You know, but I'll just say, oh, so how about, you know, experiment this week with blah, blah, blah. And do you follow up next time? Yeah. What do you ask them? You know, like today, I asked someone, because I actually gave her the 3 good things exercise. I said, so did you do the 3 good things exercise between when I talked to you last time and now? And, you know, and what was that like? And, was that interesting? What worked for you about that? What did you discover? So, and then if people don't do their homework, they can start to feel bad. And what I say is, my philosophy is that if we gave you an assignment and you didn't do it, we gave you the wrong assignment. So let's figure out what is intriguing to you and what you do want to work on.
Right.
And sort of get it back. And that's really about really working with the intrinsic motivations of the people and also not having them feel judged.
Yeah.
And every now and then you get someone who just doesn't do any of their work any of the time, but that's a whole different kind of conversation.
What would that be like?
I did have that with one of the leaders I worked with at this Fortune 50 company, and it was just clear he just wasn't up for it. He wasn't interested. So I said, put yourself out of your misery. If this isn't right for you, just don't do it. And he was stuck. He had to go through the motions because it would be too visible if he didn't. So I said, if you just hate this, let's just do what we need to do so you can just get through and not feel like it's been a terrible experience for you.
Right.
But a lot of times it's also helping people identify where they are in Prochaska's stages of change. Because a lot of times the problem is people think they should be in action mode, but the reality is they're in contemplation mode. And so you have to shift your homework, your work, your questions around the right stage of change that they're in.
Right.
So.
And do you use that assessment, like the Prochaska, for assessing where people are?
Nope. I don't use it as an assessment. I do it in the context of a conversation.
Right. And you mentioned...
Or I'll notice what gets them excited or what doesn't. Like, oh, do you want to think about doing blah, blah, blah? And you get, oh, yeah. It's like, I am totally not convinced. Then I'll move back.
Right.
To contemplation questions. What do you imagine would happen if blah, blah, blah? And then they perk up because we're just talking contemplation and imagine. Right. We're not talking preparation or action because they're not there. So I kind of more use it, back to the dolphin image, I'll sort of ping off their energy. If I'm asking action questions, I'll back up.
Right. And I have some questions about assessments. So what assessments do you use normally?
In terms of positive psychology, really the only assessment I use regularly is the VIA.
Yeah.
And that's because A, I'm used to it. B, I like that it's free. And I like Neil Mayerson, who developed it, and obviously Chris and Morty's work. And I think it's really helpful for helping people develop a new language for themselves and other people. But typically in the way that I work, I don't use a lot of other assessments. I'm just experimenting with that now.
Right.
I'm going to do a full battery on someone. Actually, it's the woman that I was describing to you. We're ending up the coaching engagement, the one who was like the bright-eyedness went down 40%, and we're sort of ending because she had a bunch of assessments before the coaching began, so we're going to end with a whole bunch to see, just what shifting she's made.
Yeah. But
usually it's just the VIA. I like to know what somebody's MBTI is. And that's basically it for me, because most of the assessing I do just through my own lens of my own experience.
Yeah.
I don't really believe like, here's your leadership questionnaire. I'll just ask someone, what's your leadership vision?
Yeah.
What leadership experiences have been the most satisfying to you? What have been the most challenging for you? Who's the person you look to for leadership? And get a sense that way.
Yeah.
There is Bruce Avolio's Authentic Leadership Questionnaire, which is a good one. I haven't used it, and I might.
Right.
I might do that one.
And when you use the VIA, how do you do that?
It just depends. Sometimes I'll do it near the beginning just to know the person better. Other times I'll do it where it becomes clear, for example, one leader that I'm working with at another multinational, she's just people really see her as very critical and a naysayer.
Yeah.
I thought, no, what this woman has is prudence. You know, and in the VIA, prudence is prudentia, which means long-sighted, with the capacity to align your actions with your long-term vision. And I thought it would be very helpful for her to start developing a different language for herself, rather than I'm so pessimistic, to say I have really strong capacities with prudence and caution and awareness of long-term strategic vision.
Yeah.
So she took the VIA, and of course her top two strengths were kind of open-mindedness and prudence. And so we were able to work with them and also help her look at how these strengths can be overused.
Yeah.
So my own feeling is, I forget where the data is from, but that, you know, most people sort of get by on 3 different strengths, or categories of strength. And at the level of leadership where these people are at, which is much higher level of leadership than I'm at, I mean, these people are real leaders, that you really need to have like 5 strengths you can pull on, because you have such a wide diversity of challenges. So with her, we used it to get a sense of what strengths she had and what strengths to work on. And she's the one who I asked this morning if she'd done her 3 good things.
Right.
And she just said, you know, my brain is just a lot of Velcro. Everything negative, it just sticks.
Right.
So well. And so we're working with her, how can she reverse the focus? How can she see good things about what she's done and good things about what other people have done?
Right. And so would you do, like, give her the assessment to do at home and then bring the results, or what do you do?
Yeah, she would just do the VIA between appointments and then send me the all 24, and then we just sort of talked it through, you know, which of these felt really right to her, to share stories about the different strengths that she has. I do the strengths limbo, how low can you go, which is like, if you really go through, when did the strengths stop feeling like there's something you do a lot? Because some people use 2 or 3. I bet other people who use, you know, 12 to 14.
Yeah.
That really feel like they use these a lot. So to kind of explore that and begin, in her case, to start seeing strengths with other people.
Right.
To start doing strength spotting, because she's just naturally so negative. I mean, she's just really good at it.
Yeah.
And with her job, it's really important that she's good at it, because, you know, she's doing long-term strategy for investments for hundreds of millions of dollars. So she needs to look ahead and see what is going to go wrong, anticipate that, and switch investments on the basis of that. So she desperately needs that skill.
Yeah.
So with her, what we say is, keep that skill with facts, but when you turn to people, you need to start doubting yourself, because you bring that to your assessment with people. You think they don't appreciate you. You think that, you know, you don't see the positive in them. In your long-term strategic investment plans, this is really working, and you're 100% right. And with people, you're about 60% right.
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of use it, you know. And in general, the way I do a lot of confronting through the strengths.
Say something more about that.
So back to the leadership development work I do, what people typically do is they arrive for this leadership development program. We do some intensive coaching before they do their 4 days of the program, and then we follow up. And what happens to them before they start the program is they get what I think of as a 360 from hell. It's a benchmarking 360 where your strengths are really described very, very powerfully, and your weaknesses are described just as powerfully. And so recently one person I worked with, you know, again, best in North America at her brand of what she does. This person's a head of legal teams. You know, best at this, best at that, tireless worker, relentless, gets everything done, everyone can count on her, building the business, everything's great. But her team feels that she is mean, demeaning, rude, disempowering, and just awful to work with. So I meet this woman thinking, what is she going to be like, you know? You're like, no, you work with her, you know. And so I met this woman who is quite intimidating at first, very well put together. And then as you talk to her, her warmth just shines through in terms of the way she's talking about her family, the way she's talking about her charity work, and even in the way that she's relating to me. I can see there's a lot of strengths here in the capacity to love and be loved. Really clear. Now, she did not take the VIA, but I just will, you know, bet you that capacity to love and be loved is in her top 3. So we're talking. I see the time running out. We see the, you know, the 360 right there that we have to address these issues, and she's trying to talk a lot so that we don't ever have to get to these issues. So what I do is what I call my stake in the ground statement, where I will just take a strength as a stake in the ground and then challenge the weakness in the light of the strength. So with her I said, I'll call her Jane. So Jane, it's so clear to me from talking with you and hearing how you operate that you have this incredible capacity to connect to people. I feel your warmth. I feel like I like hanging out with you. I like talking with you. So what in God's name are you doing so that your people are experiencing you as mean, rude, and demeaning? Because this clearly does not represent the core of who you are. You know, what could be happening? You know, so when you challenge someone like that, it's very different than if she came and sat down and said, what's going on here where people think you're mean and rude and demeaning?
Yeah.
You know, what's that about? Okay, so you can imagine. So she's like, I know. She goes, this was like just the horrible, you know, to see this. And so a lot of warmth. And I'm like, okay, but what are you doing? And she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, imagine you did know what you were doing. What would you be doing?
Yeah.
And then she would say, well, you know, I can kind of see why they call me rude. And I'm like, why? And she said, well, you know, because I'm in a meeting and I see someone outside and I'll yell. And I'm like, you'll what? She goes, I'll yell. I'll tell them what to do. I said, oh, okay, so what do you think that's like? And so, but kind of playfully and warmly, we'll talk through, you know, and with her, as has happened with a number of other people, the feedback she's always gotten is, you know, be nicer to your people.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out when you do it from this perspective, the issue wasn't about niceness to her people at all. The issue was stress. Right. And that under stress, she snaps.
Right.
So the issue isn't be nice to people. The issue is let's figure out what's going on with your stress. How can we help you manage your stress? How can we have a different vision of what you need to do and then see what happens with your people?
Yeah.
And, you know, and then some general suggestions. And with her, actually, was some very specific ideas. For example, she's trying to get someone out of her room, so she'll yell at someone else to do something. And then she goes, and I know they think it's rude. They tell me that I think it's rude, but I can't stop myself because I'm too busy. So I said, gee, you know, actually, if you left and went to talk to your assistant, that would also give you a chance to break the meeting you're in. She's like, oh, that's so obvious. I never thought of it. You know, so, you know, for that one, that was a direct suggestion. And with her, I had another coaching session with her yesterday where she was talking about one person who is always calling her and getting her wound up. And she needed to get a more positive vision. So she just saw this person is just bothering me. You know, she's coming to me all the time. She's asking. She doesn't hear anything. And you could hear, like, how she must sound to this person. So then we talked about, well, one thing to notice is this person is coming to you because she must look up to you, or she wouldn't be asking you for so much help. She's like, oh, I never thought of that. Mm. You know, and then it's like, and then it's trying to get her into a more mentor headset. Like, this person is bothering you. And she goes, but, you know, she yells at me in front of people. So then we sort of talked about that a little bit. And it was clearly, I said, well, gee, it sounds like you. She's having some stress problems. You know, and then we could work with that. And then we also worked on a vision of what is her vision of leadership? What would her ideal be, and how she managed with this person? And her ideal would be that she wouldn't catch this person's stress.
Yeah.
So we worked on how and what could she do to help herself not have the contagious response with this person arise with stress, and then how can she not catch it?
Right.
So that would be an example of using the VIA as a way to help challenge people.
Yeah. What about positive interventions? Do you mentioned 3 good things. Do you use other positive interventions?
Yeah, I use the 3 good things a lot. That's practically standard for me to get people to do some version of that. I don't do the 3 good things as it's described. What I do is I do it, I call it just scan the day, you know, go back to the beginning of your day, if you can remember it. And I'll also say, you know, like, think of what you had for breakfast. Maybe that'll bring back your day, because by the end of your day, who can even remember? And then go through the day and just think of times when you were at your best, or when you enjoyed what was going on, you finished something that gave you pleasure, you got so involved in a task, etc. And so to keep going, and then when you hit something that was negative, don't talk yourself out of it. That's CBT. You can do that, but what I want you to do is just slide over it and keep scanning your day for the positive things that happened, and just do that, and tell me what it's like. And so it's not quite the good. And then sometimes I'll bring in and, you know, think of 3 good things that happened and what it is you did to make those good things happen. But I find a lot of people just like scan the day better. So I'll sort of do what my sense is of what people will actually do. So I do that a lot. And then the VIA, just sort of spotting strengths in yourself. A surprising one is one that I think Sonia Lubomirsky talked about in the Authentic Happiness Coaching. And it's called Letting Go of Grudges. And the actual exercise I find really annoying. And then I tried it, and it was really helpful. And so what I'll often say to people is, you know, you don't actually have to do it, but just imagine a piece of paper with 15 circles on it, and in one circle put what's the thing they're doing that's just making you hate them at this moment. And then, you know, don't talk yourself out of that, but try to fill in the rest of those circles with what has this person done that you're grateful for, what is it that they also do well, how have they shown up and performed well, and sort of fill in the circles. And people say that helps them a lot, particularly before they have to give someone some negative feedback, so that they can not be speaking from anger.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I also talk a lot about, you know, so that's a kind of reverse the focus exercise, but I find that helps people. It helps deactivate yourself.
Yeah.
The other one is what I did the other day was with a leader who is moving his corporation to more of a performance mentality. He said, when I was describing earlier at the health-related corporation, and this was the first time I used it in this way. I used the it's 5 years from now and things have really gone well for you. What does your life look like? So I've done that for individuals, and that's sometimes helpful. What I did with this guy is he said that, you know, we have a lot of vision, you know, we save lives, you know, or whatever. And he goes, people are really on board with that, but, you know, we got to sell stuff. And of course, just we gotta sell stuff isn't gonna inspire people. So with him, I sort of said, you know, because this company has recently done some downsizing and kind of people are afraid for their jobs. So at least he thinks they are, and my guess is he's probably right. So then we talked about how can he develop the vision of it's 5 years from now, our company is a success, we have done fantastically well, our division has helped knock the company, you know, out of the park, and then really spell out what would that look like, and in detail, and then to think about, okay, now looking back from this future place, what did you do to make these good things happen? And I'll find out on Friday how that went.
Right.
But it was interesting to adopt it in that way because I'd never done that before. I'd never thought of putting the 5 years from now and everything has gone well as part of developing one's inspirational leadership. That if he can say, you know, he's like, you know, this is the vision, this is what I see for us. You know, this is the hill that we can take, this is what it looks like. Because I'm not really impressed with the performance cultures that are just like, we're gonna win, or the war mentality, we're gonna beat them, we're gonna kill them. You know, that just doesn't work for me. But here it's like how to use that exercise to help him create an inspiring vision for the company. That I think will work. We'll see.
And other interventions you use, typically?
I typically don't do the gratitude visit, although I'll have people think about people who influence them. Remind me of a couple of the interventions so I can think about whether I do them. I'm just not remembering at the moment.
Using strengths in new ways.
Using the V. I do that, a lot of that.
3 good things, best possible future self.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Can't remember all of them either.
But the thing is, oh, yes, well, it's not really an intervention, but I use the 3-to-1 ratio all the time with people.
Right.
Helping them when they work with their teams to that would be like when I would maybe step out and do a teaching moment and then think about how they can use it. So that would be sit with someone, I might say, okay, let's step back a moment. Let me tell you a little bit of recent research. And basically, if you want to have best team performance, ideally you want to have high positivity, like a 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 ratio of positives to negatives. And what's really important here is to remember that it isn't fake positivity, it's real. What is real that's going on that you can affirm. And then also, how do you have the right amount of challenge? How can you have about an equal amount of inquiry and advocacy? And how can you also help people not only think about themselves, but the purpose? And how all of that ideally can create an atmosphere where people really connect to one another. And there's more interaction among everybody, which will lead to better ideas. So then I'll say, and then usually when I say it, they go, yeah, right, as if I'm helping them discover something that they knew but they didn't know how to language. And then I'd say, okay, so working with your team, what do you think you could do to do that? What might help you? And then they might start thinking about how they could increase their positivity, help others, might do that through strength stories. But that people often find that really helpful. So I'll often sort of do a little mini tutorial, like a mini tutorial on that, maybe a mini tutorial on like Ellen Langer and the Dolphins, mini tutorial on, scanning the day, and then bring it back to the engagement. What I realized is it's not really a positive psychology intervention proper, but it is in the Authentic Leadership Development Program, what we do is we have people, first they share powerful stories with each other, but then they share crucible stories. And the crucible, that doesn't sound like a positive psychology intervention, but it actually is. Because it's basically a high intensity gratitude training. What it is, you know, you ask the person to really share the story of one of the most challenging experiences of their lives, when as a result of this experience, they think of themselves differently. And it doesn't have to be high drama, but it has to be, you know, you had an experience and it shifted how you think and feel about yourself. And then what we really ask people to do is to then focus on what were the leadership lessons you gained from this experience.
Right.
And what that might look like in authentic leadership coaching, again, sometimes it's more confrontational than you'd think. So I was working with one woman who is the head of a law firm, and she described a horrible experience where someone who seemed like a real sociopathic lawyer basically threw her out of the firm. Now, she has her own challenges, but yeah, and the firm has since folded because this guy was extremely destructive. But it was a horrible experience. I mean, she wound up rising higher somewhere else, but that's not the issue. The issue, this was a terrible experience where she was betrayed. There were things that she didn't see. There were ways she didn't listen to herself. And so what we did is we talked about the experience and then said, okay, so what are the leadership lessons? So here's one example. And she said, well, you know, I really learned that, you know, I could really survive under difficult circumstances. And I'm like, on a scale of 1 to 10, the pain here was like a 9. The intensity of this leadership lesson is it's about a 3.5. So what I would say to her is I'd say, that's not good enough. And she's like, what? I go, that is not good enough. I really want to hear what's the powerful leadership lesson you really pulled from this. You know, think of this as mining your crucible for the gold of what you really got out of it. So what did you really get out of it? And so she's like, when I learned that, you know, blah, 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 you know, and so she got to like a 5. And I'm like, you're not, it just doesn't feel to me like you're there yet. Your quality of your appreciation of what you got from this experience is not as strong as how awful the experience was. You know, let's go through it again. And so finally she goes through it again, and I said, so what do you feel you really learned from this? She said, I've got a backbone of steel. Right. And I'm like, yes, that is powerful. That knocks my socks off. Yeah. And she's like, and she goes, yeah, and I really do. And so then we talked about how could she really use that. So now you really see this crucible, you really do have a backbone of steel. You know, you're not making this up. You know, how can that serve you with the challenges you're facing now?
Right.
You know, and she's like, oh, you know, actually, the challenges now, they're like a piece of cake compared to. So very often what happens is people don't really pull what is truly gruelingly positive out of a crucible experience. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that may not look at first blush like positive psychology, but I think it is, because the people really get, like, I went through this and I really am stronger because of what I went through. Now, if they're not, you don't push them there, because sometimes people have not fully recovered or are not completely resilient from a crucible. And you can sort of tell that earlier on, so you wouldn't push them.
Yeah.
You know, in this case, it was clear she, you know, really had. And the big difference here is when, in the authentic leadership, we ask very specifically that people do not pick or share crucibles that are current. Mm-mm. Like, these are crucibles that you have, you know, really, you feel like you have learned from them. Yeah. And then you can really work with that. And then what we do right after that is we have people share strength stories. And so then what we do is we put together what are the leadership lessons you learned from your crucible experiences, and then how do you build on that with the stories of you at your best.
Right.
So that's one way that I'm involved with a group that's using the positive psychology principles and interventions.
Right.
And then we go from there to values, really helping people identify values, and then meaning and purpose.
Right. You also mentioned matching with purpose earlier. Have you told me everything you wanted to tell me about the purpose?
You got a few hours.
So what would be kind of the essence or the basics, or?
Very often, people don't appreciate the power of what it is that really does drive them, so they don't harness their own energy effectively. And so what we do is we help people really go through their lives to look at, in essence, what are the things they just can't stop themselves from doing. So we ask a whole bunch of questions that the Authentic Leadership Institute has come up with to really help people identify, what did you do as a kid? What did your first mentor say about you that you didn't know about yourself? And then you keep asking all these questions, building up on the crucible stories, the strength stories, their values, and then help them find one sentence that really packs in it what their greatest passion and purpose in life is.
Right.
What it is that they can't stop doing. So my purpose is to discover things that ignite change with people who matter.
Right.
I can't stop doing that. I just love figuring things out with someone. For me, that's the core of coaching, is this process of discovery and helping the person that I'm with, through the questioning and, rooting under rocks and figuring out their strengths and what's their challenges and what's going on, like what is it that's going to ignite change for them.
Yeah.
And for me, the part about it's got to be with people who matter. That always makes people nervous, but for me, someone who matters is just someone who's essentially good-hearted. I'm not interested in working with people who don't want to make a difference in some way.
Right.
So, it could be one of my daughter's friends, or it can be a CEO.
Right.
But there's been people that I've started to work with who it's just very clear to me at some point that they're really not necessarily good people. They don't have other people's interests at heart at all. And those are not people that I really want to work with.
Right.
So I won't say, oh, I don't like you, we're done. But I'll try to sense that fairly early on and then not encourage them to continue in the coaching unless there's a very strong reason.
Right.
And I've had some people like that where there's been a very strong reason for me to continue anyway.
Right.
And so I have to figure out how to get myself over the hump. But it's hard for me to work with, in the leadership world, you sometimes do run into people who are very destructive and happy being destructive.
Yeah.
And it's hard to work with them.
Right. All right. You mentioned something about small teaching moments. Mm-hmm. So I have a question about knowledge sharing. So sometimes do you share the knowledge that you have?
Yeah, I think my own style is that I love teaching. So, and that's where a lot of times I can just describe something. So I will often, particularly in my supervision, do kind of mini tutorials.
Right.
So, for example, if the person did something and it really worked, and I said, gee, do you want to think back for a moment about why this worked so well? And then talk about it. And I'll say, one perspective is, and I'll say, do you want a mini tutorial on, Prochaska's stages of change, or strengths, or Losada, or reversing the focus, or, something I'll say. So I think that really worked because, and then we'll give a little teeny, tutorial. Or, if we're sort of exploring something and I think that it would be just useful information for them, I might describe something about the 3-to-1 ratio or Losada's dimensions of change, Losada's dimensions. And I think it's because it's natural to me. It works well. What I have to do is be aware that the little teaching arc just needs to last like 2 or 3 minutes, and then say, so what does that make you think of?
Yeah.
You know, and then loop that back into the process.
Right. And when would you share your knowledge? At what times?
I guess when the person said something where it just felt like it was very relevant, or if they knew this, they would sort of feel better about themselves.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because very often, you know, I'll say something, oh yeah, you know, they'll say like, yeah, I sort of knew that, but I didn't know there was a area of study on that.
Mm-mm.
You know, I recently worked with a whole bunch of oncology and palliative care physicians, and now it was not coaching them, it was a lecture, but it was so clear to them how they just soaked up the positive psychology, because it was explaining to them why they were doing things that didn't match with traditional therapy, and so they were feeling kind of badly about themselves. And then when they learned that there was research to support what it was that they were doing intuitively, they were thrilled.
Right, yeah.
So I think that's one thing about, I think, positive psychology, that it so taps into what people do, then when they hear there's research or theory around it, it makes them feel more supported.
Right.
So I think that's when I do it, or if I think the idea or the concept will ignite something in the other person.
Yeah. And what about flexibility? Do you sometimes change models or assessments or interventions?
I would say I do that more than I follow them. I would say that I sort of take there's the research of positive psychology, the theory of positive psychology, and there's sort of the spirit of positive psychology. And I try to create a coaching relationship that embodies the spirit of positive psychology, where I deliberately believe in the other person and use the Pygmalion effect, you know, the affect priming research, through my being affect primer for the person to believe in themselves. So there's no, for example, direct exercise of affect priming, but you can use that to impact your way of connecting with someone. So I would say I'm kind of the sort of positive psychology and theory and research is this funnel, and then, you know, how it might come out is different in each situation. But a lot of it is the process that you create and not just the interventions in particular.
Can you say something more about that?
Yes, I think that the interpersonal environment, like in my coaching sessions, I will try to embody as much as I can some of the research, say, of Losada, in terms of using the 3-to-1 ratio in the session, having you know, being clear about being informed by, for example, how important meaning and purpose and values and intrinsic motivations are important to people. My questions and everything will be informed by that. And so it won't be, it's an intervention. It's just the theories and the research are kind of driving me in a certain direction. So somebody says, you know, what is it that you really want? You know, oh, my goal is to be the, you know, in the company where I work, there's something called the UX, you know, which is the high executive board. You know, I want to be on the UX. And I'm like, do you really? Yes, I really do. So what is it that you want? Like, to try to really challenge the person, like, is this truly an intrinsic motivation? Or is the person driven by something external so reflexively that they haven't even thought about it?
Yeah.
So one guy in particular who is the head of about a 10 billion euro part of a company, it's really interesting. He's like, well, he actually said, well, I think of it, I don't know. And I said, well, it'd be interesting, think of the guy you see in the mirror every day and how happy he is. Now, think of the people who are on that UX board and think about what do they see in the mirror. And he's like, oh, I think I'm happier where I am. And the irony for him is that the company then reshuffled and he actually became like number 3 person in the entire company. But he then got there intrinsically rather than I just want this because it's the next jump up.
Right.
And I'm going to be miserable if I don't have that because that's what I should want because
Yeah.
I've got to be the best and that's what the best is.
Yeah.
So that's not a particular intervention. But although a lot of times if someone will say something and you'll ask, why does that matter to you? To try to get to the sense of meaning, because I do think in positive psychology we really see that, the third path to happiness or part of the PERMA is meaning.
Yeah.
And how can we really pull on that a lot in our work?
Yeah.
So I do that through the purpose work and through challenging people when they kind of reflexively want something, as well as challenge myself. Also, when I think, I just need to make the institute bigger. It's like, well, okay, why does that matter to you?
Yeah.
To kind of also do that to myself.
Right. I also have some questions about effective factors or factors that might be effective in accounting for some of the outcome. One of them is about credibility and expectations. Do you do something to create credibility for you and how you work?
Well, I actually have more the opposite problem, which is, because I'm a professor at Harvard, head of the institute, etc., I actually try to manage the credibility the other way. Typically through being warm and informal, because people expect me, when they come in, Harvard professor, the head of the institute, started this, started that. People, my brand can be intimidating.
Right.
And I know that I'm not intimidating. I've got like so many flaws. You can shake a stick at them all, and I enjoy working on them. And half the time when I'm working with someone, I feel completely lost, because that's what I think emergent process is allowing yourself to be lost with someone. But that's not how I come across. So I come across as more authoritative than I feel inside. So that's how. So I have to manage the brand the other way.
Right.
And I think it's very important for people to be aware of their brand and of their impact. And aside, but not for me, but for other people, one really great way that I use the VIA is to help people brand their coaching through using their VIA strengths.
Right.
So, and there's a thing on the Institute about that, and in VIA Institute, the VIA Institute, I think, has it on their website somewhere, where you think about, if my top strengths are curiosity and this and that and this and that, to think about, and say, well, what makes you different as a coach? Say, well, I'll lead with the curiosity, so I'll be asking you a lot of questions, and learning about you is fun for me. And then my next strength is creativity. So we're going to then think of some really interesting applications of what to do with that, But then my next strength is capacity to love and be loved. So we'll have a warm and very lively relationship where we'll actually care about each other. And then my other strength is authenticity. So you'll get a lot of honesty from me. I will not shirk. So I think there's ways that people can really brand themselves with their strengths that's helpful. And important for us to be aware of what our brand is.
Yeah. What about the relationship? What do you do to create a good relationship and maintain it?
A lot. The first thing is to really find and attach to the value of the other person. To really relentlessly search for what is good about them and what they have to offer the world, and to be clear about my belief in them, that they can be bigger and more successful than they are. And then to see myself as a conduit of that belief in the other person that they then eventually take in themselves. But it's a very, that's not something I leave to chance. That's something that I do very intensely in my head before I meet with someone. So, so meet with them and I'll just, it's like I am there to serve them and to make them their best version of themselves and to be relentless in the pursuit of what it is they really want for themselves. And so I think I then project a certain kind of intensity as well as just utter belief in them.
Right.
And that and warmth. And you need to find what's the right amount of warmth that works for the person. What's the right amount of humor? What's the rhythm?
Yeah.
So like I have one guy, for example, and I'll say, John, it's great to see you. How are you? And he's like, I'm fine, Carol. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So I would like then pull back because my warmth is just annoying.
Yeah.
So I'll say, so really, so tell me, what was your week like, and what were the and just sort of bring myself down so that my rhythm doesn't distract the other person from their process.
Right.
I work on shutting up a lot because I'm like, I will talk for days,
Yeah.
So I'll be doing a lot of diaphragmatic breathing to just keep myself calm. But so number one is intensely value the other person, really learn how to believe in them and see where they have great capacities without being delusional, and then using those capacities to challenge where they need to grow. And then there was something else I was going to say that fell out of my head. Right, so engage with warmth. And nope, the thing that fell out of my head is out of my head.
Right. If you think about it later. So do you do other things to create a good relationship or maintain it? Said something about you were building a relationship earlier, and that was why you didn't hit the person on the head.
Well, just through really getting to know them and respecting their choices and pulling out what's great in them. And helping, let me see, there's something about, I did remember, the big thing is you have to really be a servant of the other person. That is really how I see myself when I'm a coach, that my brain is at their service. And what's really, really important is that your ego is completely not a factor. Not impressing, not trying to be smart, but just really serving the other person and staying just like a zealot, staying ego-free, and really being in a place of trying to be of service to the other person. I think that's key, and they feel it, and they don't get that most places.
Mm-mm.
So, just sort of being around somebody who's like dedicated to you sort of like does something. Certainly when I've had someone dedicated to me as a coach, it's great. And plus, we also know from Barbara Fredrickson's research that, positive emotion, it relates to a sense of interpersonal openness and the creativity. So your warmth and your positivity, when aligned with who your client is, will help create that kind of positive, cycle.
Yeah, yeah. What about client engagement? What do you do to help the client stay engaged in the process of working towards their goals?
Stay really interested. So like not losing track. I mean, I take extensive notes when I work with people. Much of it is over the phone, so I can actually take the notes during the session, which is great, and I'll look at those notes before I talk to the person, so I can really remember, better than I would remember on my own. So first of all, stay engaged yourself.
Yeah.
Like throw yourself into the relationship. And believing in the other person. And I don't have time to get together with them a lot in between sessions. So, I mean, in terms of lots of emails and stuff, I might scoot something now and then. But I do most of it like the time that I'm with them.
Right.
Has to be what does it, because I just don't have time in between.
Right. And you mentioned notes. Do you write on the computer or in hand?
If I'm with someone, I'll take notes in person because they find the computer distracting. Like, is she answering her email? And on the phone, the computer, because I can type about as fast as I can talk.
Right.
So I can actually put down 80 to 100% of what the other person says, and I can get maybe 70 to 80%, sometimes more, of what I say.
Right.
So then I can look at it and really have a clear recall of what happened.
And what do you use those notes for?
Just for me.
Okay.
Although I have some people who want them.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes people will say, "Oh, can I have a copy of the notes?" because they get like a transcript.
Right. Yeah.
So some people like that. Some people don't. One of my executive coaches did only ask once, and then just didn't want to see it again.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm going to do someday, Lord knows if I will, is look over, say, all the supervision notes to see what are the themes of supervision that have come up. So I sort of think, I might use these for some kind of, qualitative research.
Right. What about feedback from your clients? What do they say is most helpful for them?
Most of the time what I hear is that people say that they say, "Carol, you can say things and it gets me to laugh when someone else would get fired."
Right.
It's just, there's a way that I will just say, they'll say blah, 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 and they've done some really, really, really outrageous thing, and I go, "Oh, wow, wasn't that a good idea? Why did you practice that one?" They'll go, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Could you have been a little meaner? Were you practicing being mean?" And they're like, "What?" And then I'll say, "Well, replay that in your mind." Like, "Oh, that really was sort of, But so something about that I will confront them very playfully and warmly.
Yeah.
Which I think makes them feel fundamentally accepted, which then shifts how they feel about themselves, which then shifts their sense of what's their reservoir of resource that they have available, which makes them feel more empowered, which then makes them feel better in some way. So how to kind of so what else? It's really idiosyncratic what people find helpful, and so often I bet a lot of people have the experience they'll say what was really helpful to you, and it's some like stray comment that you made.
Yeah.
That, it's like practically random.
Yeah.
Oh, when you mentioned the tax, I mean, I can't think of an example at the moment, but something just random and small that.
But something you mentioned introduced into the conversation.
Yeah. Again, I can't think of an example at the moment, but sometimes it's again, it's so not memorable you can't even remember that you said it, and it somehow tweaked them. I remember an example where I received that, which I was talking to a coach, and we were talking about my daughter, and it was really funny because she was a very good coach and didn't really, and was almost a little too good, didn't really go off kind of mission.
Yeah.
And one time, and she said to me something about my daughter. She said, well, what's happening now is that, it's like you're rehearsing for your relationship with your daughter when she's an adult. This is the beginning now of your future relationship with her, not a shift of your past relationship. And it was like pivotal.
Yeah.
It was pivotal. I think my daughter was like 15 at the time. Totally shifted the way that I related to her, because I thought, oh, I'm now relating to her as a young version of her adult self. And we're beginning the relationship we're going to have as adult to adult. And it just changed everything. Yeah. It just reversed the focus for me that was really quite profoundly...
So it's a comment, not a question that you...
Yeah, so very often like an aside, something that was a comment or a, something like that. But those things can be extremely, extremely effective.
Right. What about progress? How can you tell that the people that you're working with are progressing?
Well, 1, through self-report, 2, through my own observation, 3, I typically will go back to their stakeholders and ask, have you seen a change?
Yeah.
Have their 360s changed? If their company, a lot of these companies do these automatic 360s, questionnaire 360s once a year.
Yeah.
So I kind of look and see what kind of change are the stakeholders seeing in the person's behavior.
Right. What do you think causes the changes? Like, what could be the mechanisms?
Well, some of what I went through earlier in a way, where it changes how someone feels about themselves, and then they feel more resourceful, and then when they feel more resourceful, then they have more of a sense of confidence. So I'd say increasing self-efficacy is one thing and I think positive psychology does that very well, a lot of ways. I think feeling a greater sense of positivity does increase your reservoir of resources.
Yeah.
I also think there's a part of it about the emotion regulation, that as you become more self-aware and self-responsible, you also see what your role is differently. So for example, with the one person I was describing who felt like she collapsed when this stress ball came over to her, I would expect over time, as she changes, like, oh, my job is to help calm this person down.
Yeah.
That will increase her sense of self-regulation. She'll be more able to calm herself down in situations, and that will make her more effective.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with a number of people.
What else? What could be other mechanisms that help create the outcome for people?
Well, I think you also change the person's relationship with themselves. So their way of talking to themselves shifts. Their expectations of themselves shift. I think under stress, when you're looking for a strength rather than trying to castigate yourself for a weakness, it leads to different results.
Yeah.
And I think, I do think there's something about when you develop a sense of what you want to be, it taps different resources inside of you. Like I'm going to a meeting, and instead of trying to just reduce my anxiety, I think, okay, who do I want to be in this meeting?
Yeah.
What do I want to embody? What do I want to help create for people?
Yeah.
That it just unleashes a different set of resources inside of me and in other people. And I think that probably has to do, again, with the neurobiology in some ways of activating the parasympathetic nervous system. That will just kind of put you in they'll put you on a different train.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about that, but this is, I feel like this is something I'd like to, really learn more about. What is it?
Yeah.
What's self-efficacy? What is, a different relationship with myself? What is, activating a different reservoir? What is my brain is functioning differently? What is, making me feel more of a sense of vitality? So that's about all I can think of.
Right. What do you do to develop yourself as a professional?
Talk to people like you. What do I do? Well, I do sort of scan the journals. I like the Journal of Positive Psychology, Leadership Quarterly, my own old journal, Coaching, International Journal of Research, Theory and Practice. Find out, and a lot of it is talking to people. A big source of my own learning is through the people that I supervise, where they're saying, "Oh, have you read such and such a book or such and such an article?" And the other one, though, is trying to take advantage of the kind of normal conversations I will have. So, say when I'm at the Authentic Leadership Institute program, and some of the people who teach with us are faculty at Harvard Business School. And when I see them, instead of just hanging out, I'll just say, "Hey, what do you think is going on that's new in leadership development? What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" So a lot of times it'll be through asking questions of the people that I come in contact with. And also, of course, as I've got to create learning tours for the Institute and all that, it's because I have to deliver, I have to learn.
Yeah.
And of course, going to the IPA conference.
And when you learn something new, how do you integrate it in the way that you work?
No clue.
No clue?
No clue. Just like a soup. It's just throw the carrots in the soup, and it's just all. For me, it's all like, or the reservoir. My reservoir of resource, what I have available, and as somebody's talking, what will kind of surface in my mind, rather than I don't have a coherent, like, here's the 5 top tools I use and how I'm going to use that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's really what is it that comes up in a session with someone, and at that point, it's like any port in a storm. If there's anything I've learned that I think will be helpful, I'll try to pull on it either through a question or a tiny tutorial, or like the affect priming research, for example.
Yeah.
I didn't think I am going to use affect priming research in all of my coaching sessions. It's like, the importance of how you believe in someone really impacts what they might be able to accomplish. How can I make sure I emanate belief in the person in my coaching?
Yeah.
Now that one is, across the board, but so I'd say for myself it's more a synthetic process.
Right.
Rather than, a set of boxes.
Yeah. What would you say about positive psychology coaching? Is that the same or different or special from other types of coaching?
Well, I'm biased because I think if you're a good coach, you are informed by positive psychology, whether or not you call yourself a positive psychology coach. So I would say the most important thing that distinguishes a positive psychology informed coach is their attitude about other people, more than the particular interventions they use. Because you could use Deci and Ryan and intrinsic motivation in a very kind of cookie cutter way that isn't particularly positive psychology informed. Or you can use it knowing that, if this person can really find the job that is really right for them, and it really aligns with their values and their meaning in life, and this is going to give them greater satisfaction and flourishing. It's not just the intervention. I think it's the philosophy.
Yeah.
And how can the theory and the research in the practice kind of infuse a kind of positive psychology sort of stance, you know, or spirit. But I think the stance is what's important. It's like, do I believe in you or not?
Right.
And not, do I think you are a paragon of virtue? Because I don't think people are paragons of virtue. I think they're paragons of lots of things. And how can you help them leverage what they've got to help them manage, you know, what they don't have?
Right. And the things that we have not talked about that are important to know, to kind of understand the way that you work?
Well, again, I think for me, because I came into coaching with a big background in psychology, I'm probably informed by a lot of other things as well. We didn't talk about positive psychoanalysis. That's a whole nother area I think is important.
I've never heard about it.
Well, I don't think it actually exists,
right.
really. But something like, for example, we talk about repetition compulsion. And we see that as if you have a father who's alcoholic, you marry an alcoholic. What about positive repetition compulsion, as it were, where you create warm, thriving communities and families wherever you go? Issues like projective identification, where on one hand you've experienced the negative feelings of another. Well, what about people who inspire others?
Yeah.
And so actually you wind up infusing other people with positive emotions.
Yeah. So
I think that there's a huge range of potential theory-informed interventions you can make that aren't yet, you know, really common knowledge.
Yeah.
So for me, how to sort of pull on the real diversity of approaches. So.
Other things that we've not talked about that are important to understand?
Well, what we didn't talk about, but it's sort of obvious, is also the importance of integrity.
Okay, say something more about that.
Just when you're, I guess I talked about it a bit with keeping your ego in check, but really trying to have as much integrity as possible when you're working with people. So if there's some kind of conflict of interest, that you're able to choose what's in the best interest of your client.
Yeah.
And trying to just do a good job for them. You know, I think there's a balance between having faith in the process and also doing your homework.
Yeah.
So, I think that's in a way, as you get really confident in what you're doing, you have to be careful that you keep doing your homework.
Right. And what would the homework be?
Going over your notes, you know, reflecting on the client, you know, because for me, I'm good in any session. I don't have to worry about if I show up for a session, it's not going to be a good session. I just don't think about that. So I could be sloppy. So to keep myself on the cutting edge, I want to kind of keep learning what's new, and sort of stay on my kind of cutting edge. But for me, you're making sure I have some time to reflect more.
Yeah. On
the person, and I think that's my growth curve now. Sort of the irony is you get so busy.
Yeah.
That you don't have the same kind of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how to make time? I think that's important.
Right. And what advice would you give to other people who are kind of new to this field and would like to learn about positive psychology and how to use it in coaching?
Read a lot, get good supervision, find a community of people that you can engage with and talk with. Practice a lot. Find those low-fee or no-fee clients and practice it. And even just stuff like when I first used the VIA, I gave it to everybody in my family to see, okay, what is this really like? Like, really make it your own.
Yeah.
Don't accept things at face value, but really metabolize the material yourself.
Yeah.
And make it your own. And I think you need a lot of sort of contact with people, whether it's one-on-one because you're an introvert, or more, having lots of contacts because you're an extrovert, but sort of find your own style and your own learning profile and sort of stick to it. And I think continuing to show up at conferences is a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, I love the posters actually.
Right.
Conferences I love, just because that's the newest thing, or like, going through the dissertation abstracts to see what are the new students coming up with.
Right.